Good evening. After a two-day manhunt, 2 sleepless nights, law enforcement have apprehended Vance Bolter. That's 48 hours that law enforcement involved in a complex and dangerous manhunt.
Tim Walz. I don't know who thought he was a good idea. He was like a second iteration of Tim Kaine, but even worse. He turned out to be a pathologist.
Picture this. Tim Walz thinks he's playing chess, calm and calculated, until Lindi Lee flips the board, takes the queen, and starts juggling the pawns while sipping tea. This stops being politics fast. It turns into a roast, a slow unraveling, and a plot twist so wild even Netflix wouldn't touch it. And if you thought Walz's secrets were locked tighter than Fort Knox, think again, because Lindi Lee didn't just bring the keys. She showed up with the flashlight and the popcorn.
These are women's decisions to make about their healthcare decisions and the physicians who know best when they need to do this. I use this line on this, just mind your own business on this. Things worked best when Roe versus Wade was in place. When we do a restoration of Roe, that works best. That doesn't preclude us.
He was trafficking in lies and conspiracies. He said that he never supported a national abortion ban. We have in writing a screenshot from his website wherein he supported a national abortion ban. So he was just lying with him.
Tim Walz was cruising toward 2025, convinced his carefully pressed Midwestern nice image was untouchable, the political equivalent of comfort food, plain, predictable, but reliable. Then came Lindi Lee, who didn't bother knocking on that polished facade. She drove straight through it with sarcasm sharp enough to cut cheddar. Almost overnight, the governor's once spotless reputation stopped looking like a warm casserole and started resembling leftovers forgotten in the fridge. Soft, questionable, and getting worse the longer it sat out.
Who could possibly think it would be a good idea to lie about being in Tiananmen Square when you were in Nebraska? I mean, come on, it's just so beyond the pale. And now he's thinking about running for president. Didn't he get the memo that the American people do not want a second coming of Kamala Harris and Tim Walz? And Kamala is in California considering a run for governor. We do not want any more DEI woke, any of that. We just don't. We're done with the woke and trans insanity.
If you're enjoying this breakdown, please subscribe to the channel. It helps more than you think. Tim Walz's entire persona has always been a branding exercise. The calm, steady, practical leader assuring everyone that everything's fine while the house quietly smolders behind him. He's the guy who smiles, pats you on the shoulder, and says, "Don't worry, I've got this," as the Wi-Fi cuts out, the fridge dies, and a raccoon somehow sets your garage on fire. Polished reassurance on the surface, chaos simmering underneath. That's the image Lindi Lee just ripped apart, and now people can't look away from the wreckage.
What were they telling your mom, and how soon was it after the election? Like
a week or two. When it wasn't at that point, I was just asking questions. Like it wasn't even. I was like, what happened to the $2.5 billion we raised? Why did we spend it on Beyonce? Why did we spend 2.5? Why did we spend millions of dollars on Oprah? Like legitimate questions that needed to be answered. But the amount of hate I got for that was just overwhelming. And the final straw, the moment that I knew that I needed to leave, was actually around Christmas.
To understand the roast, you first have to understand the costume. Tim Walz built his identity like a political IKEA shelf. Plain, functional, sturdy enough to hold a few family photos, but shaky if you look too hard. He's the teacher turned politician, the neighbor you'd trust to water your plants, the dad joke guy who somehow also commands the National Guard. On paper, it sounds flawless. In reality, it's branding that only works until someone notices the screws don't match. The wood is cheap particle board, and you definitely overpaid. And that someone this time was Lindi Lee.
And then the biggest tell of the evening was when he told the moderators, well, I thought the rules stipulated, or something to the effect of the rules were saying that you weren't going to fact check. And you talked about own goals. That was an own goal. That said everything.
But
so
Lindi,
he was counting on the fact that no one was going to push back.
Are you frustrated then that Walz didn't make the argument that you're making to me right now?
I think he did a really good job tonight, and we had a live focus group.
She looked at Walz's record and essentially said, "Nice mask. What's underneath?" And that's when the receipts started flying. Because while Walz has sold himself as the calm hand on the wheel, the car has swerved more times than a teenager learning stick shift. His COVID policies were a case study in indecision. Close it, open it, lock it again, then shrug when everyone's lost. He branded himself as pragmatic, but his version of pragmatism looked more like flipping a coin and calling it strategy. And crime Well, that balancing act between reform talk and law and order promises left him wobbling like someone trying to stand on two boats at once. It never works, you just get soaked. While he stalled behind talking points, the headlines told a different story, one that didn't fit his steady leader fairy tale. What makes Lindi Li's takedown sting is that she doesn't stop at the contradictions. She layers in razor-sharp sarcasm, spotlighting hypocrisy you can't unsee once it's exposed. Walz claims the moral high ground while clinging to party insiders so tightly he might as well be furniture at DC cocktail hours. He markets himself as grassroots, but you'd need a telescope to find those roots buried under layers of establishment.
Highest rating of the night when he pointed out that Trump completely failed on the border. He didn't deliver on the border wall that he promised. He blew up the border deal that we had, border as a campaign issue. So he scored really highly also when he mentioned Matthew 25 and how his faith guides and inspires his empathy for people, a quality that Trump and Vance so abundantly lack.
Lindi Li didn't just poke holes in the narrative, she turned it into Swiss cheese, reminding everyone that shining up your medals doesn't erase the messy decisions underneath. What makes this hit harder isn't just that Tim Walz looks inconsistent, it's that the folksy teacher persona starts to feel less like authenticity and more like wardrobe styling. It's like discovering the indie band you loved was actually engineered in a boardroom to appeal to suburban shoppers. The Target brand candidate, perfectly packaged. Now that Walz has stepped onto the national stage as Harris's VP pick, the magnifying glass isn't optional anymore. It's a laser. Every flaw once brushed off in Minnesota is suddenly a national talking point, and Lindi Li is flashing a neon sign that makes it impossible to look away. If Walz planned to coast on cardigan charm, that plan is finished. Lindi didn't just present facts, she made them sting, and in politics nothing sticks like a clean sting. Now the fallout starts, ignore it and hope it fades, or respond and risk making it louder. Ignoring Lindi is like ignoring a fire alarm. You can pretend nothing's wrong, but everyone else is already heading for the exits.
It doesn't increase us from making sure that once that child's born, like in Minnesota, they get meals. They get early childhood education. They get health care. So the hiding behind we're going to do all these other things when you're not proposing them in your budget. Kamala Harris is proposing them. She's proposing all those things to make life.
Addressing it is even trickier because that means stepping into her arena where sarcasm is the weapon and you're already bleeding. But here's the real twist. This isn't just about Tim Walz. That's the point. It's about an entire system that survives on image control, and Walz just happens to be the latest face caught mid-costume change. And Lindi Li, she's the commentator, happily pointing out that the emperor's new clothes don't fit. That's why this lands harder than a standard political critique. One viral roast cracks the dam, and suddenly journalists, rivals, and armchair critics are combing through Walz's record with magnifying glasses. Once someone says there's a fracture in the foundation, everyone wants to test how deep it runs. That's the force of exposure. It doesn't stop at one post, one clip, one segment. It multiplies. Now Walz is trying to sell himself as the steady co-pilot for Kamala Harris's White House run, while the internet jokes that his steady hand looks more like it's shaking a martini during an earthquake. Lindi Li struck the match. The only question left is how big the fire gets. And the real spectacle? Watching spin doctors scramble like contestants on a cooking show who just realized they forgot to preheat the oven.
Feedback. I want to take you back to the very first answer that he gave. Let's just remind ourselves, he sort of stumbled through. Right now the crisis in the Middle East is, front and center of the global news agenda, and we would expect maybe that someone who was running to be the vice president would have more confidence. Let's remind ourselves of what happened.
October 7th, Hamas terrorists massacred over 1,400 Israelis and took prisoners. Israel's ability to be able to defend itself is absolutely fundamental. Getting its hostages back, fundamental, and ending the humanitarian crisis in Gaza.
Walz's team now has a choice to make. Double down on the cardigan charm or act like none of this is happening. Spoiler, neither works. When Lindi Li lights you up, it's not a debate, it's a barbecue. The smoke doesn't clear. The first move, as always, is to cry out of context because apparently everything is out of context now. Walz could trip over a garden hose and someone would insist the clip missed the angle that proved it was an inspiring leap. But once people start seeing a pattern, no amount of carefully worded statements can stitch it back together. The media reaction splits right on cue. Some outlets still treat Walz like the lovable Midwestern uncle who brings hot dish to the potluck, covering Lindy's takedown as just another spicy moment to smirk at before moving on. Others smell blood in the water, and in politics, nothing sells like blood. Suddenly, Walz's past decisions, those quiet compromises and awkward contradictions, are no longer footnotes. They're headlines. What used to live in state-level coverage is now national news, blasted across screens with the kind of ominous music you'd expect from a true crime documentary.
What do you think happened when he gave that answer, Lindi?
Well, as I mentioned before, J.D. Vance went to Yale Law School. He is seasoned, and I said this in the previous interview. This is what he does. He's slick and he's sharp, but Walz is a fundamentally good guy. And our focus group of battleground voters, mind you, understand that. They perceive that this is a down-to-earth guy, salt-to-the-earth guy who wants the best for the American people versus Vance, who is backed by Peter Thiel and was a venture capitalist and is working for his billionaire crony.
And here's the kicker. Tim Walz isn't built for this level of scrutiny. He spent years in the state-level sandbox where a little mess is tolerated as long as you smile, wave, and keep things friendly. The national stage is different. Up there, even your shoelaces get fact-checked. A calm tone and a dad joke about fishing season won't save you when you're under a microscope. And Lindi Lee just made sure that lens was crystal clear. For everyday viewers, the irony is hard to miss. Walz, the supposed man of the people, suddenly looks like a man of the script. His persona now feels endlessly adjusted to fit the moment, not grounded in something solid. The timing couldn't be worse. Years ago, maybe he could have patched this with photo ops and a neatly timed op-ed about bipartisanship. But in an election cycle this intense, where every move is dissected like a frog in a high school lab, it's brutal. Voters aren't looking for leaders who might grow into the role later. They want consistency now, not promises of it down the line.
I mean, I'm not on anyone's payroll. I'm not beholden to anyone. That's why I'm here telling the truth. I'm not here to gaslight anybody. This is just the truth.
And what is the truth?
The truth is this is just an epic disaster. This is a $1 billion disaster. Actually, it was $1.018 billion, I think, right? There were $20 million or $18 million in debt.
Right.
It's incredible.
And Lindi Lee just exposed how Tim Walz's consistency is about as sturdy as a paper straw in a hurricane. Social media turned it into a full-on meme factory almost instantly. Clips of Lindy's takedown flying around with captions like, Walz's speedrun of hypocrisy. When your brand is Midwestern nice, but your record reads like Midwestern chaos. The digital age doesn't just reveal the gap, it blasts it on repeat. And Walz is learning the hard way that once the internet crowns you the punchline, taking back control of the joke is nearly impossible. But this matters beyond the laughs. Modern politics runs on trust. Real or manufactured, it doesn't matter as long as people believe it. Walz's entire appeal depends on that trust. The steady hand, the reliable neighbor image. What Lindi did was yank the rug out from under it, showing that the trustworthy brand was more costume than character. Once voters spot the zipper on the back of the mascot suit, good luck convincing them it's a real bear. Walz isn't the first politician to face this kind of exposure. American politics is full of figures who thought their branding was unbreakable until someone pointed out the cracks. The difference here is timing and delivery. Lindi Lee doesn't just criticize, she makes it entertaining, and that's what makes it stick.
Millions of that. I have friends that I have to be accountable to and to explain what happened because I told them it was a margin of error race. I was promised, Jen O'Malley Dillon promised all of us that Harris would win. She even put videos out saying that Harris would win. I believed her. My donors believed her. And so they wrote massive checks. I feel like a lot of us were misled. And even on the night of election night, I looked somebody in the eye and I said, are we going to do this? Are we going to pull it off? She told me yes. And I asked somebody else, like, how are you feeling? He's like, we're going to win Iowa. And I was like...
And that's what makes it lethal. In today's media ecosystem, people don't share dry critiques. They share roasts, sarcasm, the clips that make them laugh while nodding along. That's how narratives move now. Entertainment dressed up as accountability. Meanwhile, Tim Walz's opponents are quietly celebrating. Because in politics, the worst hit isn't an attack from the other side. It's exposure from someone who isn't even playing the game. That's what gives it authenticity, and that's why it sticks. You can bet the Kamala Harris campaign is is feeling the pressure. A VP pick is supposed to project stability, not drag baggage into the frame. Walz was meant to be the steady co-pilot, the safe choice who wouldn't spook moderates or steal the spotlight. Instead of steady, he now looks shaky. Instead of reassuring, he looks rehearsed. And that's the last thing you want in a race where the other side is sharpening attack ads like medieval weapons. What's most striking is how fast the conversation flipped. Before Lindi stepped in, Walz barely registered nationally. More background character than headline, the kind of name you'd search once after a VP announcement and forget minutes later.
What's your take?
My take is the most neglected part of home ownership is the gutters. It's personal for me.
This is Democratic vice presidential candidate Tim Walz making an appearance on the popular TikTok show Subway Takes.
Had problems with gutters before. You get your basement wet, you get ice dams, cause a lot of problems.
How often do you like looking at gutters?
I look quite often, surprisingly, because
Like
I kind
you're
of judge it.
inspecting.
You know, I try not to be judgmental on people, but when I see a well-tended gutter, it says a lot about something.
But now he's front page news, not for policy wins, but for contradictions. It's the political version of being remembered not for the performance, but for tripping on the red carpet. Unforgettable, just not how you planned. And the more Tim Walz tries to brush it off, the worse it lands. Shrugging reads like surrender, smiling looks like denial, and addressing it head on only keeps the spotlight burning. It's a lose-lose. Walz built his image on being the authentic, steady leader, and Lindi just showed how manufactured that image really is. It's like peeling the label off an organic product and realizing it came from the same factory as the bargain brand. Once people see it, they can't unsee it. And here's the almost poetic part. This isn't a downfall driven by scandal, lawsuits, or some massive corruption bomb. It's exposure. His contradictions, his branding, unraveling under their own weight, death by 1,000 sarcastic cuts, each one amplified online, until the image can't hold together anymore.